My speech, ahead of her time. My mother definitely was ahead of her time. No, I don't mean free love, tattoos, miniskirts, online dating, pierced body parts, and foul language, but she was definitely ahead of her time. My mother was born in 1910 to a family of 7 children on a farm in the middle of Iowa. Her mother was a teacher, and she became a teacher. I guess that makes me a third generation teacher. She became a school teacher and would drive a horse and buggy to school. How do you become a teacher, believe it or not, at the age of 18? Well, she had really good grades in high school. She passed the interview, passed the test to get her license. And in Iowa, that was all it took to be a school teacher in a one-room school that taught all 8 grades. Her father was a very successful farmer who was regularly sought out for farming advice. His goal was to provide a farm to each of his 7 children. He did not even like the idea of driving his Model T, so my mother usually drove him into town for supplies because he didn't like getting behind the wheel of that vehicle. He trusted her to do so even at the age of 13 with no driver's license. I've heard that Model Ts are not very easy to drive. Without even after teaching, she went to college at Waverly, Iowa, and she was ahead of her time because she got this idea that she would like to become a lawyer after working in a lawyer's office for a while. And the more she thought about that, and the more she planned for it, she decided that was not probably the best thing to do since women were hardly considered okay to be lawyers. And maybe she should think of some other profession. It was the Depression. Her father, who had already given 2 farms to his oldest children, began to lose his farms, and in the end, he lost them all and was not able to provide for her with her education. He found out there was an opportunity in the big city of Chicago from that little farm town, and it was an opportunity to become a registered nurse. Her goal was to become a registered nurse, had to do with the fact that she wanted to be a world traveler. And you could do that as an airline stewardess. You could not, you could travel the world, but you had to be a registered nurse. That was the requirement of being an airline stewardess, believe it or not, in the middle 30s during the Depression. She found a program in Chicago that would provide room, board, training, education as long as she was there and worked at the hospital. She learned what she was while doing, and without any student loans to pay off at the end, but with very severe living accommodations, including a time that she had to be in and a time before she could go out. When she got her diploma, she finally became a nurse, but things had changed. She had married, I had been born, and you could not be a stewardess if you were married. So then, her career was to be a registered nurse for the rest of her life. Many times, as a private duty nurse, she was working 7 days a week, 8 hours a day, and would go on sometimes even a month or more. And she was just always at work every day. Other times she had regular hours. But she provided me with a substitute mom, and that was my grandmother, a very sweet, as I say, a farm wife. And she would be there when I came home from school. And I remember all those wonderful, sweet, warm memories that she was a good person. But I most of all remember the homemade donuts and chocolate cakes she would make and teach me to make. And those were the things. And then there were other things she made for me. I remember much of the time I was wearing shirts in grade school that she had made from cloth and sewn. I didn't realize how special that was at the time when all the other kids are wearing store-bought clothing and I had to wear homemade, but I was wearing something that was made at home, and the warm thoughts that I had of her. My mother brought warm thoughts to me too, because I remember every Sunday we would have popcorns and sit around with the family and share a bowl of popcorn. It probably added to my addiction to the concept of popcorn. And now I think that's the only food that I would never want to give up, no matter what. She had different feelings about animals too. Animals are meant to be outside. As she grew up on a farm, that's where they belong. But somehow we twisted her arm into having a dog that stayed in the house and stayed with us. And it was so, Bouncer was so special. They taught me responsibility. There were lots of chores to do, but they also gave me opportunities to go out and explore. At the 7th and 8th grade, I was out with a shotgun and a rifle hunting for rabbits. And soon I was able to find a job at 12. They let me go do that. Many parents did not. I spent a lot of those later years working because they were allowing me to have the freedom and responsibility. But I also knew that meant don't get in trouble while you're a teenager, or they may not be bailing you out. So I never gave them any reason to fear. They even let me have the responsibility of riding a train all the way to Iowa, 250 miles by myself at the age of 8 to stay with family relatives for a week. I remember having a BB gun that was so much fun and just shooting things. Oh my gosh, at 7 or 8. And then I shot at a group of little ducks and I killed a baby duck. I went and grabbed it and in tears, I brought it to my mother and asked, well, can you fix it? I mean, she's a nurse, right? She should be able to bring it back to life. And she said she could not save it. But that was a lesson that I should learn not to do the things I knew I shouldn't be doing. I will remember that lesson for the rest of my life. In addition to that lesson, we brought home 2 of those other ducks that survived my shooting escapade and raised them. And it was so much fun having those little ducks follow me around the yard. It took away a little bit of the fun in the fall when my father butchered one, and that was our Thanksgiving dinner. And he expected us to eat it. I did not like that idea too much at all. My mother was so welcoming of friends that I girls and boys, other friends that I brought home for dinner, and did not look at them with disapproving looks. So then maybe sometimes she did disapprove of who I brought home. She even listened to my music. I can't imagine it was the most pleasant thing for her, but she tried to listen and be concerned and try to be interested in my interests. I do remember all those Saturday mornings she spent most of her Saturday doing laundry, with a chore, working all week, and then having to spend that time with the wash machine, the wringer, and hanging it out. Anybody remember hanging out clothes? That sure made for a real project, but she wanted her family to have clean clothes. The culmination of my story with my mother is to remember this. At the age of 19, I was working full-time, 66 hours a week, and she was about ready to buy a new Chevy Biscayne. For those of you who don't know, that was the bottom of the barrel of new Chevys, for about $2,100. And I was able to somehow convince her that why don't we buy a new Corvette for $3,800 and split it half. You can drive it whenever you want. I will never interfere with when you want to drive it, and I will only drive it in the time that's left over. And I never did change that commitment. But she had a lot of fun, but she did also, we saved money on insurance and so on. But one of her favorite stories was that when driving to work one day in her nurse's uniform at the age of 50 something, and a policeman pulled her over and accused her of drag racing somebody. And she said she was just so upset. She said, drag racing? What do you think's going on here? But then we got to the real question, because once the policeman had seen who she was, he says, what is a woman like you doing driving a car like this? And that really set her off, and she enjoyed telling that story numerous times over the years. And what business do you have of telling me what kind of car I can be driving? Boy, that's a long ways away from driving that Model T in 1923. If you're out there listening, Mom, thanks so much. I love you so much. And it's been a very special living with you as a child and growing up with you.